What's up and welcome to the Level Health Podcast. Today, Josh is interviewing Steve Hall. Steve is a champion natural bodybuilder, online coach, and the founder of Revive Stronger. He's also one of the hosts of the Revive Stronger podcast, which is an evidence-based podcast focused on training, nutrition, and bodybuilding. Big thanks to Steve for coming on our show. You can follow him on Instagram at Revive Stronger or check out revivestronger.com. If you're a bodybuilder or if you're interested in bodybuilding and you haven't listened to the Revive Stronger podcast, we highly recommend it. We'll have all of that linked in the description below. For those of you that don't already know, our website, Level Health, is a directory, community, and network of qualified personal trainers. We want to help create a space where clients are able to find the right trainer for them. We have accounts for both clients and fitness professionals. Client accounts are always free, where you'll get access to our trainer directory and other resources. Our Basic Pro option is available for trainers, and our Verified Pro membership will be available early this year. We also have a free membership option for trainers that want access to our growing list of discounts and resources. If you haven't signed up already, head over to levelhealth.net and set up your membership. Thanks for listening, and if you have a second, we would love it if you gave us a rating and review so that our podcast and the professionals we interview can get more exposure. You can also subscribe so you don't miss any of our new content. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
You got your whole, all of a sudden you had this whole gym set up back in the background of your podcast. I'm like, man, he's making do. But also I've pointed towards you a couple times for like, and actually Jeff Alberts, you can get a pretty goddamn good physique in a bedroom gym or in a garage gym. So like, it's definitely been good for reference during the pandemic. I think probably for a lot of people.
Yeah, for me, it's funny because I've obviously just moved and I'm now training. Like, people would have a go at me for training in a commercial gym, and like, it's a well-equipped commercial gym, but they're like, oh, Steve, but you're trying to go pro. This is kind of your, I guess your career is in bodybuilding and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I can't go to a gym that doesn't exist. Like, I have to travel hours, or actually it would be an hour door to door at least, to go to like a quote unquote bodybuilding gym with maybe better gym equipment. It's like, this one's 10-minute walk away. I've got a like job and things, like I've got to do stuff in my day as well as be able to train. And now I've just moved, literally 5-minute walk away. It's like a proper bodybuilding gym, and it has this nice kit available.
Oh, very cool.
And I was just recently asked, like, do you think having that better kit available is going to lead to like tangible improvements in your physique versus what you had before? And I'm like, you know what, like you just said there, I like to think if you're good enough at your kind of programming and your exercise execution and what little tweaks you can make to movements, you can get like almost 99% out of, doesn't matter what you're given. It's like, as long as you have some of the basics available, you have maybe cables, dumbbells and barbells, or a Smith machine even. I think you can get like 99% of the gains. And people focus too much on like the fancy stuff. They're like, oh, but I need this like Cybex, or I need this Paramount, or I need this Prime, or I need this supplement.
That mythical pullover that everybody's looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
Pullover. That's actually hilarious that we started out. So that's not how I wanted. I mean, I had my intro, how I wanted to talk about, but this is a great place to start, because like, what you're talking about is like understanding the tools that you're using. And I think oftentimes people chase these tools. They're like, we need, like you said, this crazy kit, this crazy setup at the gym. But it's like a big part of what you're doing is like learning what actually matters so that you don't waste your time. I mean, as an athlete, like you have to, as a natural athlete, I'm sure you're aware of this, but near your genetic potential, like you're probably knocking on that door pretty close, a lot closer than a lot of people are. And like, once you get to that point, like you will have had to have learned how to use the tools available to you. And it's not like this fancy new gym setups. I mean, we could get into like, I'm sure you wouldn't mind talking about like the physiology of like hypertrophy and like just how you can apply that, how you can create the conditions that will result in that with a lot of freaking tools, like a lot of stuff. So I've thought that the pandemic has made people a lot more resourceful. But I think like we tend to drift towards novelty. So like when we see our favorite Instagram, fitness influencer doing something on a machine, doing a step down with the assisted pull-up machine, we're like, man, we need an assisted pull-up machine. Otherwise our glutes aren't going to get as big as that. But it's like, I don't know. Think about like what the conditions are being created within the muscle first and foremost, and then we'll go from there and try to replicate that however we can.
I think the way you put it in terms of tools makes it really, really, like, that's a great term for it. It's like if you have a drill versus like I have this standing desk here and I didn't have a drill, but the wood's quite soft, so I could drill in with just a screwdriver. It would have been easier with a drill, but I can make it work with a screwdriver if I try hard enough. And I think it's the same with just like the equipment you have. At my previous gym, I had this brand of hack squat, the Matrix hack squat. I had to use yoga kind of blocks to try and get good depth on it. And it worked really well for me for what it was. I now have a Cybex one, and it's like, I don't have to do anything to it. It's just set up perfectly. So you might have to try a little bit harder. You might have to be a bit more resourceful. But even if when people got all the way back training from home, they maybe were doing these, I don't know if you did it, but where you do like a squat against a wall, and people were using like a foam roller, or I was just literally using a towel, and the friction of the wall was causing resistance, and like bands around my shoulders to try and kind of equalize the resistance. And yeah, like you said, if you're a good enough tradesman or good enough trainee, doesn't matter what tools you're given, you'll make them work. So I think particularly as coaches, and we had clients in those situations, coaches like yourself who are well equipped with that knowledge, it's not a stress for you. You can be like, you can really reassure your clients, like, doesn't matter what conditions you're under, we're going to be able to make something work, because the body doesn't know if you're using a Cybex hack squat or you're squatting against a wall in your bedroom. It just knows like tension and stimulus, fatigue and volume, and does it have to adapt and get better? One just makes it easier than the other.
Yeah, we can actually move on to the show now, but I think that same principle can apply to like when you see all types of novelty and exercise variation. It's like, okay, but like that curl and this variation of a curl are creating the same internal stimulus. Which one do you like? And I'm sure you get questions like, which one's better for building biceps or better for building back? It's like, which one is applying the most tension and stimulus to the muscles? Is like, at the end of the day, like that's what matters most. And it's not like what's getting you the most likes and everything, but all right. So anyway, Steve, so Revive Stronger has like, I don't want to come out the gate blowing smoke up your ass, but been like one of my favorite podcasts for sure. And I think it's because the way that you ask questions and the way that you are like genuinely curious about these topics. And I mean, it's my main focus isn't aesthetics anymore, but gosh, it's so helpful having somebody. And there's a lot of people out there, but I mean, like you are one that I pointed people towards a lot that like is really just getting down to like the principles and what actually matters. Cause I keep coming to this time and time again on shows, but like, life is going to come up. Like I'm not trying to get as jacked as possible, but I'm trying to get as jacked as possible with minimal effort. I have all types of health reasons for that and everything, as well as some aesthetic effects. But I mean, like I said, when I was starting this podcast, very reluctantly, by the way, I'm not a very big fan of podcasts, but having conversations with people like yourself is like a huge bonus to it. But I honestly observed the way that you interviewed, because like it's very level-headed. It's very, okay, I'm going to ask questions about this. I'm going to try to remove my own biases as much as possible and just learn as much as I can. And then not to mention that Dr. Gabrielle Fondero, I was actually introduced to her on your show. I asked her about your show. She said that was the show she was most nervous for, the one that she went on to yours first. And she said she was way over prepared. Anyway, so that was actually where I was introduced to her, and now we've been working, collaborating on level for over a year now. So I guess I owe you a very big thank you for that.
That's awesome, and it's really humbling to hear that mine's, despite you not loving podcasts, mine's one of the ones you listen to, and to know that you think I'm a half decent host is nice, because you probably are the same. Like you're just like, I don't know. You almost feel like you're winging it, or I don't know. People, you'll read the one comment where the person's just like, "Oh, all you do is sit there and nod," or something like this. I'm like, oh, I need to stop nodding, and I need to challenge my whatever the expert that's come on. And it's like you said there, I just have found my role within the podcast and the host. And for me, like you said, as a host, I'm not there to be the expert. I'm not there to challenge. I'm not there to like try and push my bias or feelings upon someone. And you don't have to agree with everyone. I'm sure I've been on like a handful of podcasts. I'm sure the host has been like, I'm not sure I agree with him on that, but I'll just sit there and kind of like observe it and respect it. And I think that's the most important thing that I try and do as a podcast host is, first of all, do my background homework behind people. So like Gabrielle Fondero, I knew she was recommended through Mike. I'd kind of looked at some of her work. I knew who she was. So I brought her on. Very much that's what I try and do with all my guests, is know a fair bit about them and know that ultimately they are putting out good information and they're trying to further the industry, and they have a good core kind of, that's what they're trying to do, further the field. It's not their own agenda that they're trying to fulfill. And I respect that. And I don't have to agree with everything they say. And I certainly don't agree with everything all my guests say. They even contradict one another now and then. So it's a bit challenging if I was to. And you just try and pick apart kind of what do I feel is their value and what's the best, what do I find interesting. And I just had Brad Schoenfeld on for the 5th time, and it's like, which is crazy to me because he is literally like the god of hypertrophy in many ways. Like he is the guy doing the most research in the area that I care most about. And he was just like, I still remember the first time we interacted, and you were just like this skinny kid who was just super eager to learn. And now you're a champion bodybuilder, and it's amazing to see. And I was just like, Brad, it's very much thanks to you, your work and research, because I'm applying that, and that's how I'm growing. So yeah, it's like you said, I don't even know, like I get really nervous, and I used to get really nervous, and I'm quite introverted. It's much easier not to put yourself out there and interview people, but it's been so valuable, not just for my business growth, but for my personal growth, to be able to interact with such smart individuals and see them break down and how they talk and demonstrate the information. I learn something new every single episode. It's such an honor. And I'm glad I got to introduce Gabby and you in some way.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of those kinds of things like serendipity. Like we had been working on Level as a project, more of an idea up until that point, because I mean, it's the same thing. You mentioned like separating your biases and how important that is to your approach. And I think that's like so important because it seems like you're coming from a similar perspective as I am. Like there's a lot of bullshit in the industry. I think that you saw that a lot in the industry before you got to where you're at now. And I kind of want to hear about like your background and everything. So I'll ask about that next. But like at the end of the day, I'm not trying to add more shit to the industry. Like I know for a fact that I'm not an authority at all. Like, and I'm very comfortable like you are being like the facilitator. And at the end of the day, like, are we adding value to people's lives? And you definitely are. And like the same thing here. Like I'm extremely introverted. Like actually, admittedly, this morning I woke up at 4 o'clock every day, like I do. But today I was like, I got a podcast in an hour. I'm like, I don't know. Do you think Steve would be mad if I just like, just cancel him, go back to sleep or something? Like I never think that, but like, I don't, it's so emotionally taxing. Once you're on the podcast, it's fine. But like up until that point, I mean, you talking about talking with Brad Schoenfeld, like Gabby's been super awesome hooking us up and connecting with people. And she's like, oh, I could probably call in a favor and get Brad Schoenfeld on. I'm like, let's wait until either A, I'm better at doing what we're doing, or I have like man, I'm sure he's going to come out with a study sometime soon that's just groundbreaking. And I'm like, oh, let's wait until then. But yeah, it's been awesome. I feel like just been like punching above our weight. Like just like the people that we've connected with have been like, why do you want to work with us? Like, I mean, I know that our mission's good, that we're headed in a positive direction for everybody, but it's like, I mean, I was just a personal trainer. You were just a personal trainer. I'd like to hear about that next. Just like, how did you get into doing what you're doing? Really, the way that I like to phrase it is, can you just give us some background on who you are and why you do what you do?
Absolutely. So yeah, the like health and fitness, I say health and fitness, being active and sporty has always been part of me. I really love pushing myself, sometimes too much. And that's definitely bit me in the ass multiple times. But I never actually pursued I never thought fitness and like sports and things like this would be my career. Like my actual overall goal when I was little, if I was to choose my dream job, would be to have been a footballer. Like I wanted to be a professional footballer playing for like Manchester United or something, soccer anyway. And I got somewhat far in that, but at school I was bullied, and a lot of bullies tend to be like that jock type of individual. And they certainly were where I was. And I was like, I'm not like going and doing PE to spend more time to be bullied. Actually, it was really annoying because I got put into the top class or set anyway. So I got put with all these individuals because I was good at sport. I was never like amazing, but I was pretty decent at like physical endeavors in general. Not to say muscle building, but so I never pursued it to that level, but it's always been a big part of me. And I've always been that skinny kid. I've never been like big and muscular. And in fact, I picked up, it seems crazy to me to have picked up this nickname, but when I was maybe 15, 16 years old, 17. I was playing football or soccer, and I had the nickname Big Steve because I was one of the first people to go to the gym. I went when I was about 15 years old. So I've been going for like 15 years to the gym regularly, lifting weights. Not that I knew what I was doing back then, but I had more muscle than the average kid my age because I simply did something they hadn't done. Not that I was a hyper responder by any means. I still remember some of the kind of stronger people, or the people who are really good at sports in my year, and they were like benching what took me years to get to bench, and they just did it from the get-go. It's just like, you know, there's those genetic freaks, and you definitely see them when you're at school, and they're just like ripped with a six-pack and doing nothing. So anyway, when I kind of went through school and I went through university, I was still really into just like pushing myself. I did running, rowing. I did play soccer at university as well. Just liked doing that. But I went to university and did geography with business. But whilst I was at university, I used to do these 10-kilometer runs around campus, and I would be really into these. So I actually had a Garmin like watch on. I had like heart rate monitor, like I was properly into it. And on the Garmin watches, I don't know if they still have it, but they'd have like a shadow of your previous best time, and you could see whether or not you were beating your shadow. So I'd always focus on that because every time I had to beat that shadow, like progressive overload. Little did I know that's what I was applying in this situation. And I came to some traffic lights, they're flashing amber, and I was just like, I'm going, like they're flashing amber, surely I can go. Went, looked right, smack, there was a van and it hit me. And I had, in the short term, like scarring that to like stitch me up across my back and elbow, and I fractured my skull. They released me though after a few days, and I went home. Soon after going home, though, I had a seizure, and this was I say I had a seizure. I didn't have a seizure. I had like close to a seizure, like a panic attack. I was vomiting, I was sweating. To me, I was in a daze. And my parents took me to A&E, and I was in hospital then for about a month. And they found I just had very low sodium levels. So I was just retaining every bit of water you gave me, like a camel, just like retaining it, and my body couldn't regulate kind of sodium and electrolytes and water. They think it was a bruised pituitary gland, but they're not exactly sure. It makes sense, but they're like, I don't know, it's just like a weird event. And I had a bunch of kind of health consequences through that. I lost all the muscle I gained up to that point, and I was like 20 years old at that stage. So all the like newbie gains, that 5 years of training kind of vanished, because the quickest way to lose muscle, like people are worried about losing muscle, I'm like, be worried if you're in hospital, not eating and just not moving. And my body just kind of ate itself. So I lost a couple of like over 20 pounds when I was in hospital, because I just wasn't like eating. I had no appetite. I just felt really bad. And that lasted for like a year. I was kind of recovering from this whole thing. But in that year, I wanted to gain back the muscle I'd lost, gain back some confidence. But I lost all confidence in, like, I didn't play soccer anymore. I didn't go for runs anymore. I just found the gym, and that was like my safe place. And I started to educate myself more and more about this. I did a lot of things wrong, and I started to stumble upon the things to do them right. And when I found that, that was through Lyle McDonald. He was one of my initial influences. I read his website, Body Recomposition, every article on there, like over and over and over and over. I was just like absorbing it all. I was like, man, I just love information, applying it and it working in practice and making sense and science. It just really, really sung to me. Through him, I found, I think, Alan Aragon, Matt August was one of my early influences. There I found Eric Helms, 3DMJ, Ian McCarthy. I don't know if you know of him. People might recognize the name. He was kind of one of the more science evidence-based guys at this initial time, putting out information. I would digest his information. He's kind of gone a little bit by now. He's not as big as in the industry. But that was my initial learning. And when I started applying their things, I went from like this, like the bro science of gotta eat clean food, like bulking and like just eating tons of like clean food so I wouldn't gain fat, but I got very over fat, and like bro splits. And I found, oh, I can do like upper lower, I can do flexible dieting, macros. And I started learning that. And I was like, oh, this can actually be applied and become a lifestyle. So during this period of time, I did graduate from university. I started working office jobs and was working in London. I decided to educate myself on the weekends to become a personal trainer. So on the weekends, I do that. In the evenings, I train my bodybuilding, and I qualified and decided, right, I'm still living at home. I'm pretty risk-free in that regard. I'm going to become a PT at my local gym. So I became a PT there. And at that time, I also, it's a bad combination, because I also decided to start a contest prep. And the reason it's a bad combination is because, one, I'm introverted, and you need a lot of energy and a lot of focus to become a good personal trainer, and confidence. And I didn't really have any of that. And then I had very little energy because I was getting diced basically in a calorie deficit. So that didn't work very well. But what it did do is it led me to online coaching, because there were kind of kids who maybe were, I call them kids at the time, they were kids because they were a couple of years younger than me, from the local schools, who were interested in kind of looking at me, and they're like, I had the nickname Compound Guy because I was squatting and deadlifting and benching, and they're like, you're always doing these big lifts. We're just like doing bicep curls and like lateral raises and stuff. And why is it, man, you're getting really lean. What are you doing? So they didn't want one-on-one PT, but they wanted programming. So I was like, I can do you a training program. I can give you some macros, and you can kind of fill this with foods that you love and enjoy. And they're like, oh. So I started getting results with these guys, charging them, I think it was £30, which is probably like $50 a month. And so really cheap, but it just built a really good profile for me. I just started getting results with them. I loved it. I absolutely loved helping these guys, because it was like, they were the ones in the sort of age where it's like, man, results are really slowing down. Anyone who's bigger than me is on steroids. I'm just going to do a cycle. So I was really helping these individuals stop kind of getting into that. So I competed for the first time, 2014. Everyone thought I was crazy, because they're like, you've just recovered from this like accident, and like you could cause yourself some issues by dieting to such an extreme level. But for me, it was a case of, and I always ask competitors, what's your why for competing? My reason for competing was because I wanted to prove to myself that I had overcome that previous head injury and accident, and I was kind of basically 100% healthy. And I got into the best shape of my life. I recovered from it absolutely fine. And to this day, touch wood, I've only ever been better for it. So I was like, if I do this with all the health consequences I've gone through, with all these problems, then I can help a lot of people do this. So I decided at this time, I also, and I'm still with my girlfriend, we've just purchased the property, but I moved into London with her, and it really forced me to up my game in terms of like putting myself out there and building an online kind of coaching base, because that was now my full-time job, and I was barely being able to pay the rent. So I was writing blogs and articles and everything. And at this time, the name was like Revive with Steve, or something like that, Steve Hall. But I wanted it to be bigger than me. So I ended up bringing on a team of coaches. Obviously, we've done seminars with RP and Mike Israel, and I started the podcast, and I'm kind of fast forwarding here. And I've competed now to 2017 and just last year, and managed to come second in the world at the WNBF finals, versus not even placing as a novice when I first competed. So it's been a journey. And I changed the name from Revive with Steve Hall to Revive Stronger. And I wanted it to become something bigger than myself, to provide an avenue for people who wanted to either bodybuild themselves, maybe not take it to the competitive stage, or maybe take it to the stage in a really healthy, productive way, and learn the principles and the science, and bring people on the podcast who I deem as experts and people who can help further the field and spread the awareness of them, and be a curator in that sense in terms of content creation. So yeah, the name comes from reviving from that accident stronger, and being in the best shape of my life after that, through the scientific principles, essentially.
Yeah, man, there's so many aspects of that really resonated with me. Just that process of like being a young kid, and I'm sure I don't want to speak for you, but having all types of body image issues. That was me, like, and then you got called Big Steve, because yeah, I mean, it's so funny, because you could literally just be the first teenager in your group to lift, and then you get results, and then that, oh man, that's dangerous, because first off, you don't know what the heck you're doing. Anyways, you're getting results despite the dumbness that you're putting in, if you're even putting in any like structured programming. But and then for me, I'm speaking from personal experience here, it became such a part of my identity that like for over better part of a decade, I was deathly afraid of losing abs, and like 100% to my own detriment. Like I was trying to mass without losing abs. And so like I'm treading water for like legitimately the better part of a decade, because like I had so many psychological obstacles to overcome to actually putting in into practice a reasonable approach. And then once similar to you, once I got introduced to like the magnitude of stimulus that a compound lift provides as compared to like just that basic like order of operations, like that in and of itself is so beneficial. And then you could hit, accessory work to get the rest of the volume in. How long did it feel like you lifted before you knew? I mean, I'm sure you still don't feel like you know what you're doing, because that's kind of like the curse of, being a perpetual student. But how long did you feel like you were lifting before that you had any idea what you're actually doing?
So it's funny you say, I feel a bit bad for saying this, but I do now feel like I really know what I'm doing. Yeah. And I have done, I would say, for the last good 3 years, like really felt confident what I'm doing. And the reason I bring that up is not to sound like big-headed. It's just because it's really helped my results when I've felt very confident in Steve. Oh, yeah. Like you're applying the principles. And when I just engrossed myself into that and I stopped program hopping or looking at the latest study or this person's doing this exercise or this program or metabolite phase this, strength phase that, whatever. No, I've got something that's working. I can tweak it, but like just keep your head down. And people might speak in your ear and tell you, oh, you should train to failure more often or whatever it is. Like it's a big thing in the UK. Like Dorian Yates is like, everyone loves Dorian Yates and he obviously trains failure all the time. But the more I kind of just listened to myself and engrossed myself into the process and was confident with what I was doing, it definitely helped. But it took a long time. So like I said, I've been lifting since I was like 15 years old. I'm now 31. So it took a long time before I felt very confident in what I was able to do. And it's funny you brought up kind of I called it, and I don't know if I was the first person to term this, but I feel like I might have been, at least in our niche, was adipose phobia. I just named fat phobia, adipose phobia, like being scared to put on fat, because that hampered me in essentially when I first bulked up. Like I said, I did all the clean food and I got over fat. And ever since I got over fat, I never wanted to do it again. And that held me back in my gaining phases so often. Yeah. So I had to battle that a lot. And I've made presentations and articles on this thing called like fat phobia and how it's holding people back. And a lot of the guys I work with, mainly men, are like, they're these people who are perpetually kind of holding themselves back and kind of like skinny because they just don't put them into that prolonged surplus, and they kind of struggle with their body image and all these factors. And I try and highlight all the pros of that, like more energy levels, you look bigger in t-shirts, your training performance is way higher, you have way more food flexibility, you like just everything functions better when you're in a surplus. So I think once I managed to accept that particularly and applied my training, and I think also the scientific principles of strength training that Mike Israetel published many years ago with Renaissance Periodization, James Hoffman and Chad Wesley Smith, that was groundbreaking for me, because I'd read a lot of textbooks. Like I got a bunch of textbooks on my shelf there, but half of them were like just very strength specific, and they weren't hypertrophy specific. And whilst this was the principles of strength training, it laid all of them like the concepts into clear like specificity, progressive overload, like phase potentiation. I was like, like I understand this now. Like it's put it into concepts and ways that I'd never really thought about it before. And I could build programs, I could assess programs based on these principles, just like you might have like various like keto diet and like the warrior diet and I don't know, carnivore diet, and like you bring it back to the principles of like calorie deficit, macros, nutrient timing. You can assess the diets better. And so that's what that book did for me. It kind of allowed me to see the matrix, like through the matrix, like all the numbers. So that was really groundbreaking for me. So yeah, I would say it took me a long time, but maybe the last like 3-4 years, I felt very confident with what I'm doing. And yeah, that's after interviewing hundreds of experts on the podcast, reading loads of textbooks, applying it on myself, having coached loads of clients. It takes a long time to start feeling really like you know what you're doing and should feel confident in that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like I finally know what I'm doing, just because like you do learn the principles, and then that allows you to have faith in the process. And then it also allows you to like, again, have faith and not second guess yourself and be like, okay, I'm applying these principles. And I also know what to do next. I know what step to take next, because I mean, if you have a foundation in those principles, like I look at it as like, I'm a biology major in university right now. Like I look at things as like a biological system. And when you understand, okay, these inputs or stresses on the system, whether it's a calorie deficit, whether it's tension on the muscle, whatever, how do we, we know how the body's going to respond to that stress. How do we summate those stresses over time so that we can achieve a desired result? And it's really like, we're not going to be 100% perfect anyways, but we're applying these principles that are like going to get us 95% of the way there. You mentioned Mike Israetel's book, like the muscle and strength pyramids as well. Like putting that stuff into a framework is like, God, it's so incredibly important. Actually, that's why I was so intrigued by what Gabby was doing and Shannon Beer, because they were providing a framework for a coaching model that was like so soft and like amorphous and like shooting in the dark. Like, how do we connect with people where they're at psychologically so that we can take them somewhere else? And like, as we know, the fitness industry has so many, I don't say ego problems exclusively, but like a lot of problems along those lines. And so like when we're able to separate ourselves from that a little bit, I wanted to ask though, so my girlfriend recently has really gotten into, I don't know how this happened, the Natty or Not Reddit forum. And
no.
I know, dude. I know.
What an awful place.
She finds it quite entertaining. In fact, I got a text from her just a couple of days ago. It was like, who do you think is peak Natty? And I'm like, I never imagined I'd be having this conversation with you. But I'm curious, and I'm sure that you don't spend much time on there, but you're on there, right? Like, I'm sure that you've been put on there at least in the last couple of years.
I do know I'm on there.
Okay. What are people saying?
Which is hilarious to me. I'm just like, man, I feel like I don't know, if you were to ask like Mike Israetel or I don't know, someone in the industry, who's the most like natty guy, like, I just feel like my name would be thrown in there. Like, here's the guy who's like the epitome of like a natural, like has to try incredibly hard to grow any sort of muscle, has put in over a decade of like years into the thing and like dedicated his life to it almost, and still isn't a pro or anything particularly special. So for me to be like natty or not, I'm like, man, you guys are so clueless. But yeah, I have seen that I'm on there, and like they're like, oh, look, here's some like gyno in this picture, and I'm like, what the fuck? I don't have gyno there. It's just ridiculous to me. So
yeah, I mean, you end up looking weird, even if you're on, like, you are natural. I mean, and this is just a metaphorical situation, but you can be the most natty person in the world, but like, you're going to end up kind of looking not normal, because like normal people don't look that way. And like, when I was looking at a picture they were analyzing yesterday, and like his nipples were pointing slightly, I'm like, dude, he's got big pecs. Like, I don't know where his nipples are going to go. Like, so let's chill out. Let's stop calling people out for no reason. But I mean, it just kind of speaks to the way the fitness industry is, because it's not, I don't want to say this, it's not cool to be natty, because like it's almost like you're picking up change when other people are picking up dollars. And like, Steve, I don't want to again blow smoke up your ass, but I feel like you would be on, I don't want to say a much bigger stage, because like it doesn't get much bigger than the WNBF, but like you probably would be on a much bigger stage if you were on gear. Like, you're pretty freaking big, dude. You have the frame. It seems like you don't have the genetics though, right? Like, you don't put on muscle very easily, but I mean, that exogenous anabolics kind of, goes around that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, I've been asked the question, like, why have you stayed natural or whatever? And my honest response is, I think it's down to environment. Like, I think that's mostly what it is. I think when I was younger, if I had friends who were on gear and I had access to it, maybe I would have tried it, because I just wouldn't have really known any better. And I do love bodybuilding as well. I like the enhanced side. I love how some of these guys look, and they're huge. But I've got to the point, age puts me off. I'm already like in my 30s, probably a bit like late for it. I also think if I'm not going to be one of the top naturals, I'm not going to be one of the top enhanced. Yeah. And for all the health consequences that come along with it, is it worth it? So I then boil it down to, what do I do bodybuilding for? And what I get out of natural bodybuilding provides me everything I could possibly want. Mm-hmm. So I still feel like I'm learning. I still feel like I'm progressing. I still feel like there's room for progress. And so I don't think I would get what I would want out of going enhanced. Yeah. And I also hate needles. Not that I think that you'd probably just get used to it, wouldn't you? But like getting the vaccine and stuff, I'm like, fuck's sake, why do I have to get another booster? So that obviously, I mean, it's a smaller thing, but I think most of the environment, I've just not had none of my friends are like, obviously Mike and Jared, and like they're enhanced, they're friends, but they're in the US. Like I have no idea how they all access it all. I'm completely clueless. I have no friends in the UK who are on gear. So it's just no one in my proximity. So I think that was a large influence. And like I've just been and almost built a brand now off natural bodybuilding. And I do really enjoy natural bodybuilding. But it's like you said, and Broderick puts it like this, it's like the enhanced side is like Formula One race cars, whereas we're like, I don't know, just like a Vauxhall, like whatever, like a basic car is driving down the road. It's like one is like very impressive. The other is like, yeah, I mean, sure.
Don't get me wrong. Like if you're stepping on Olympia stage, like if you can step on Olympia stage, I would probably take gear again, because it's like, man, that's the cost of admission. But it's like, if you are just wanting to be the most jacked dude in your local gym, it's like, I don't know that the benefits are there, like you said. And I think that the health benefits of natural bodybuilding, holy shit, like not again, like knock on wood, the benefits of resistance training that are coming out and actually like parsed out in the literature, it seems too good to be true. Like I keep saying this to people because it's like, I'm hesitant. I'm sure you are, to jump on like new research that comes out, or like the weight of the research shifting in a direction, because we don't want to be hyperbolic and jump on things too early. But God, natural bodybuilding might be one of the best things that you could do long term, provided that, you know, you're doing all your X's and O's and everything like that. But like putting on some muscle almost only is going to add to your health span and your longevity, you know, as long as you're not adding stuff into the mix that does the opposite.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I will say, however, though, I think the level that I take natural bodybuilding to is like, there's like the bell curve, isn't there? Like natural bodybuilding taken to this point is exponentially healthy. And then if you go this far, you start getting to like a slightly less healthy position. Still healthier than not doing it at all, but slightly less healthy, and like force feeding, like making sure I'm in a surplus, bulking up to like 200 pounds on like a frame of 5'10" is maybe not the healthiest thing to be doing. And like going up and down, and like I'd probably be healthier like putting on a bit of muscle and then just maintaining that. But I mean, that's not fun. Like I want to keep gaining. And like a lot, you make choices in life, like for Emmy, gimme, there's a gotcha. You like, don't know, smoking cigarettes, like great, you enjoy that, but there's a gotcha, and it's going to take time off your life. Or don't know, like there's a whole thing with like smoked foods and processed meat, like bacon and burgers and sausages, and there's nitrates, and maybe it's not the most healthful thing, but I mean, having a little bit now and then, it's enjoyable in life maybe for you. Same with like, I don't know, the people who live the longest, like living these like calorie restricted lives where they really like don't eat very much, because that slows down their metabolism and they don't like degrade as fast. It's like, well, what a life to live. Like how's that going to feel long term? So yeah, I think it's definitely, compared to like the enhanced side, it boggles my mind sometimes with the enhanced side, because I think some of them are incredibly ignorant to how detrimental it can be to their health. Some of them are very honest about it, like the RP guys, but some of them are like, oh yeah, you got to avoid these like sweeteners in like a diet soda, but they're on like tons of gear that's like they don't even know how damaging that is to health. And I'm just like, man, the ignorance is unreal here. Like, yeah, I don't know, eat sugar after 6 p.m. because you're going to store it as fat and it's bad for you. And I'm like, okay, like you're not talking about all the side. Do you even understand like the level of disparity there?
Do you have to remind yourself that those kind of thought processes still occur, like that people are still out there thinking those kinds of things? Like I remember I had a hard cutoff when I was so I was hyper obsessed about food when I was a teenager, close to eating disorder. But like if it was past, like I'm not fucking kidding you, Steve, if it was 6 o'clock on like I was done. And I very specifically remember I was at my friend's house and he offered me an apple, and it was literally like 6:02, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, it's gonna don't you know this is gonna be stored as fat? So do you have to like go and find out, like remind yourself of these things?
I do, and I came from the same background. I forget there's a term for it where you're like so focused on eating kind of clean. Orthorexia. Yeah, that's what I would say. I pretty much had. My parents and my sister in particular were close to like not reporting me, but advising that I go and see a doctor, because I was literally like, I can't eat that rice. I have to have this rice. I would take my Tupperware with my food to like our cousins. I wouldn't eat the food they provided. Like it makes me really cringe to have gone through that. But sometimes to have gone through that, it makes you a better coach and mentor to other people, because you can see the signs if someone isn't completely comfortable, and you can be like, okay, let's just take steps away from this. But yeah, I do have to remind myself that people like that, because in our space and like evidence-based kind of bodybuilding and health and fitness, like a lot of the community is now well and clued up on that. Yeah. There's so many people, like you just have to walk to like a supermarket and pick up a magazine and you'd be like, the amount of bullshit's in there. Or even like documentaries that come out on TV and you're like, half of that is garbage. Like, come on, why are we not past this yet?
Yeah.
Or Joe Rogan's podcast, like that's a great example.
So yeah, man, that's a point of contention, because like I turn it off when he talks. Like I'll listen to some of his I don't want to go on this rant too much, but I'll listen to some of his shows because he has interesting guests on. But as soon as somebody talks about, or he talks about, or a guest talks about anything health or fitness related, that's when I'm like, dude, you I understand we live in a free world, but you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like stop saying these things. Like, oh man, you don't need athletic greens to survive. Like you're fine. It's like the orthorexia thing, like it is kind of important for a coach to at least identify that that's a reality, because like that's such a quagmire for people. That is such a problem for people. And like speaking from like, it's fully engrossing in your life. And if you're just like, you know, kind of haphazardly telling them, oh, you need to just do this instead. But it's like, you're not appreciating the psychological connection to that. Like people, like you're saying, or you have orthorexia, like that's a legitimate issue for people. And we feed into it for sure. Some of the I'm used to the magazines at the checkouts, like, oh man, some of the magazines for women are so freaking predatory. It's so, and it's to the point where like, nobody could believe that. Like, it's like lose 30 pounds in 1 week doing this. And it's like, oh man, it's not physically possible. It's not physically possible, but like I guess people want it. So that's why it's there. And yeah, so we haven't really hit any of the questions, but I wanted, but like, I think it ended, no, dude, I think this ended up being, I wouldn't have even thought to go down this route, because this is such an interesting conversation and an interesting point of friction for the fitness space, is like the natty, the using principles as nat, like, and then like people try to use the exogenous hormones to get around the principles, and then they're like, okay, you don't need the principles, but it's like Lane Norton's thing, like you save money without a budget, so you know it doesn't money doesn't matter. It's like the calorie balance still matters. There's these principles that exist no matter what. Like if you can live, I mean, a lot of people that are enhanced, like they've gotten those results despite, like, that's survivorship bias, and that's another point of contention in the space, is the survivorship bias within, like, coming from coaches and trainers. So like overall, I think that we definitely, as a profession, I think do you consider yourself a personal trainer still, or are you more like working as physique coach?
I'd probably say more a physique coach. Yeah, I guess it's funny because I literally filled out something today where it's like, what is your like job title? Business owner. It's easier.
just send them a link. Yeah, send them a link to your website or something. But so I mean, it is interesting. I wanted to ask though, how is your approach from your show? Because I want to take this opportunity to, I mean, you have an extremely unique background and unique life experience at this point. How has doing the show changed your approach over time?
So I'd say one of the biggest things from my first show that I regret not having awareness of was NEAT, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Yeah. I was just like, because I was on the gym floor, but I would try and take every opportunity for like clients. If they canceled, awesome, I can sit on my ass more. If like I would try and avoid being in the gym and cleaning. I'd just sit behind the computer and do like client work. And that just meant my cardio had to go really high. And that was one big lesson, was like step tracking. So that was really frustrating. And also in that prep, I did a lot of like the diet hacks in terms of like Walden Farms, and like I did all this like protein fluff, it's called, where you like use xanthan gum and protein powder and mix it together to make like a huge, like just basically air bubble of like protein and stuff yourself with it. And just accepting hunger as part of the process was better the next time round. And then from 2017 to the last time I competed, I wouldn't say there was any like, I think I just got more confident in the entire process. And the thing that was most humbling to me was that there's levels to condition. There's one thing having your glutes like in, and there's another thing having them like fucking in, like walnut butt ridiculousness, like striations everywhere. And a card for me is condition for sure. Like every season I've got conditioned. Even my first 2014, I had glutes in my, like lines in my glutes, and I was one of the more conditioned competitors. But this time around, like conditioning was not enough. Like the standard of bodybuilding, if you don't come in pretty conditioned, if you come in pretty conditioned and you have like fantastic muscularity and symmetry, you're going to do well. But if you don't have those two things, you have to come in ridiculously conditioned to even stand a chance. And the competitive space of natural bodybuilding is just leveled up. If I brought the physique that I had in 2017 to this last season, I wouldn't have like even placed in shows. It was, and I placed in British finals when I competed back then. Like the competitive nature of the sport has just leveled up, and people are just doing it better. And I think one of the big takeaways from this season was just give yourself plenty of time. Give yourself like plan it all out, and then give yourself an extra month because more time is all right. And you can kind of get to a level of competitive conditioning, and you can hang out there for a little bit. You can include some refeeds, some diet breaks, periods of which where you're eating more calories, and it can sustain you a little bit. It's not like normal, but it's like you feel reinvigorated and you're certainly getting a benefit there. And then you can kind of dig back down, and you're looking to lose small amounts of fat at this point. But like even a pound, half a pound can be the difference between first and second place in terms of condition. So yeah, that was eye-opening to me this season. Was just like everyone's coming in conditioned. You like I gotta come with muscularity and symmetry now, like outstanding levels of that. And I also got more respect for judging and how much they put towards like symmetry and aesthetics. Unfortunately, like we said, my genetics for bodybuilding aren't great in terms of I have big bulky joints, I have a big waist. I got
tiny wrists, man. That's one of the first things I was like, oh man. Yeah.
Tiny wrists can play in your favor, but they can also play against you.
They give you those ratios, but like in terms of strength and putting on muscle mass, like I got little, I don't know if you can tell how small they are. Like I got little girl wrists. So
I've got big chunky like wrists and ankles and hips. Like, so I should have a lot of potential for muscle mass building, which I think I've done pretty well with. But then I come against this, like, I don't know, very often black guys have incredible symmetry and proportions, wide clavicles, tiny waist, sweeping quads. And this was the guy that beat me at the WNBF finals. And I would say I was considerably leaner than him. He was conditioned, but if I came with his conditioning, like I don't even think I wouldn't have got to finals in the first place. Whereas he can kind of be a little bit less conditioned, but because he is such muscular, he was also very muscular. He has such muscularity and symmetry, and proportions were just like sublime. Like he packs him up. He's like born out the womb as a bodybuilder.
Like Phil Heath, man. I talk shit about Phil Heath all day, but that man was born to be a bodybuilder. It's just a beautiful frame.
And it was just a new level of respect for that in terms of like the best of the best. They put in the work, the effort, and they have great genetics. If you don't have like either of these, you can get pretty far. Like I think I've demonstrated that, but I'm never going to be the best of the best. I can have ambitions to do that, and I'm going to train as hard as I possibly can to be there. But the reality is not necessarily that. I don't know and I think one other takeaway from this previous prep was like, it is that experience cures anxiety, but also having someone in your corner helps so much. So I didn't have a coach, but I had someone I'd consult with, who just basically send photos to, and they'd be like thumbs up, or they'd be like, I think this might be a good idea, especially in peak weeks when you just get into your own head about like, am I looking better? Am I looking worse? I can't really tell. Should I push more carbs up? What am I doing? You just kind of lose your head a little bit towards the end of prep. So having someone in your corner who you truly trust, whether or not that be a coach or someone you can consult with or a friend, invaluable. And it also makes the process more fun, because they can be like, I don't know, they can give you a kick up the arse, or they can be like, dude, you're looking freaking awesome. Go out there with your head held high, be really confident. If you don't have that, you kind of have to get it from somewhere else, and it's quite tough. And I think some people really relish off having encouragement and kind of having that person in their corner.
Yeah, a coach in a lot of aspects of life can be really beneficial, or just a mentor, or just someone, you can trust along those lines. You mentioned neat and walking right out the gate. That's why has walking, I mean, we don't have to touch on this very much because I have one big question left I want to ask you, but like, why has walking not been appreciated? Like you're saying you're jumping on, ended up having to do a bunch of cardio because you're sitting down, but like you could have strolled around the gym, got a couple thousand steps in between each session and like accomplished literally the exact same thing. I was talking to somebody recently, and personally, I think a part of it is as a trainer, as a coach, like if you tell somebody to walk and that's how they get the results, it's like, man, I've kind of just like relinquished my authority there a little bit because they can walk without me. So like, is it just like the culture currently? I mean, I
definitely did it. Yeah,
this
past season I was using it. Yeah, I wore that fucker for a long time. Sorry if I could. Hopefully,
no, please, no. Did you? So the idea there is that your body won't be able to sense that you're losing weight, and then it hopefully won't downregulate metabolism, your metabolic rate. Did you see benefit from that?
So yeah, the main benefit that we can definitely be sure is happening is like as you are a smaller individual, that you're going to use less energy to move yourself around space. So if you wear the weight, like then you're kind of having to move that same weight around, which is why like your BMI is like it's just based off how big you are. So you're kind of keeping that level of expenditure up there. The other side benefit is meant to be, and it's drawn off a few studies on rats, is gravitostat, which is like basically the weight on the bones, the body senses it. And it's in like the osteocytes in the bones, and they can regulate hunger management potentially, where basically you can just see benefits in terms of like you're less hungry when you wear the weighted vest versus if the body senses you're losing weight. I can't say I saw those benefits. But I definitely dieted on more food this time around, 200 to 300 calories more throughout prep, which for some individuals could be a big difference. For me, I don't think it was. People have asked me if I'd use it again, but there are some big cons. Like it's a pain in the ass for one. You also, to get the real benefit from it, and for me to burn that many extra calories, I had to be stood the majority of the day. And
does it need to be sun up to sun down to like wake up to sleep?
I think that's unrealistic for most people, but certainly the majority of your day. So I was stood with it for 10 hours of my day. Which is basically morning until like 5 p.m. And then I'd have like 4 hours sitting on the sofa, like watching like dinner and TV and whatever, or doing some work. But then it's also like quite impractical at various times. Like I had a funeral I had to attend during my prep, and I was like, oh, how am I going to use this? And so I've just become, I think I'd use it more of a tool and less of a like, you have to like do or die, like you have to be wearing the weighted vest or you're not getting the benefits. Just like, oh, maybe I'll just wear it for my formal walks. So rather than burning 200 calories on that walk, I burn 300. Awesome. Without doing anything different, but wearing the weighted vest. I think when you have it on all the time, there's just this systemic fatigue and axial loading even that's just like drains you a little bit. I don't know whether or not though my calves grew from it. I wish I measured my calves.
That would be possible, right? That would be like, that is something that you see. I mean, some of the biggest stimulus I get is when I go from wearing boots and then it gets nice outside. So I'm able to wear like sandals or toe shoes or something like that. And I'm getting some actual footwork at that time. Man, so like you're talking about like messing with like biological mechanisms. I'm just like, man, what if I'm just worried that your body's gonna just like overload and explode, and it's gonna be like, I know that I'm losing weight, but I'm not. I don't know what's happening. So I've always thought that's a super plausible mechanism for sure. But like you're saying, like the effects, like whether or not it produces a significant effect is, and for your investment, it seems like it might not be necessarily worth it. But all right, Steve, my very last question, I just rephrased it a little bit because initially I wanted to hear, how do you feel the fitness industry can improve overall? But like I said, I want to use this kind of unique opportunity. You're leading a little bit of a tribe. You're definitely leading I would say a group of people, because I don't think it's like this, group of people, but you're leading a mission, really, like kind of like a cause, and you're kind of standing at the forefront there. So I wanted to hear, how do you feel that people that are leading a tribe in the fitness space can improve what they do and just be more positive and beneficial for everyone that's involved?
It's a good question. I would say the thing that I like the least when I see people who do have they're maybe an influencer or they are like this authority figure is they like disrespect people who are trying to learn. In that an easy example for me would be on Instagram, someone types in a question box, that influencer or authority picks that question and they break that person down. They basically are like, you're a fucking idiot. do you not watch any of my stuff? Or they just make a complete joke. And all you're doing is causing people to turn away from the industry and not want to learn and not want to ask questions, which is the worst thing you could possibly be doing. And I don't understand why this person does it. I don't know if they get like, people find it funny and they get likes, they get interaction from it. You're not furthering the field by any means. You're just, I don't know, furthering your ego or like your entertainment value or what have you. Just ignore the question if you're going to do that. Or you can bring it up and be like, did you mean this? Or you can just shoot them to like, I don't know, your website, to a blog article or something. Super easy. Just DM them. That always frustrates me, is when people just burn other, like people who are really trying to learn and just completely just rip into them just for no reason. It makes everything harder. So I think that's one thing. And then just using simple language where possible. So if you can say it simpler than what you're saying it, try and just say it in the simplest language, because then people won't look at it and be like I fall for it. Like I will say hypertrophy and it's like, well, I should just say muscle gain or something, because it might put someone off. And I can see reasons for using certain words and things, but you just have to be, try and be inclusive as possible, I would say, as a whole, with both.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, because at the end of the day, something that I've always, actually I say always, but as I've become an adult and become more mature, like I just don't want to be a negative out in the universe. Like there's enough negative forces out there. There's enough negative energy in the world. It's like, I don't know, maybe like you said, it is ego. Maybe it's because it's somewhat anonymous. People are fine with like lashing out at people like that, but it's like, man, at the end of the day, what are you trying, like, as a trainer, as a coach, like I've always tried to, like, you don't know when that person, like that's their last time that they've worked up the courage to try to get into a gym or ask somebody for help losing weight or whatever it is. It's like, we as fitness professionals, as a fitness influencer, even, like, you have such a responsibility whether you realize it or not. I actually wrote a podcast on our podcast. I wrote a blog on this. Like, if you have people that follow you as you do, like, you have a responsibility to just to add value to their lives. Like, but like whether or not you realize it, like they are listening, they are looking, they are learning from you, and you know how you affect them is potentially going to have ripple on effects. Gosh, we get to a little esoteric here, but like everyone that's in their life, and then man, so you can have a much broader reach. I think we tend to think that our reach begins and ends on the social platform that we're on, but it's like, oh man, I don't know, like, we're social beings, so it goes much deeper than that. So anyway, Steve, I very much appreciate you coming on today, man. It was great talking with you, and I'll continue pointing people in your direction, probably even more so now, because it was great to hear like your background and how a lot of the things, I mean, you don't talk about yourself too much on the show, so I didn't know all that much about you. I read some on your bio and everything, but it was interesting to hear that like a lot of our background was quite similar. And I mean, that probably speaks more to the fact that, like, man, it's pretty widespread that like teenage boys get into fitness for the wrong reasons, get influenced by other people that are doing it for the wrong reasons. So it's like, let's all do our part to kind of make the fitness industry a little bit better, like you're doing. So
I appreciate it a lot. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm down for this at any time, and I appreciate you putting people our way. Yeah, thank you very much.
Have a good day, man.
Cheers.